Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here coming to you for another Sunday session. And this week we've got a follow-up to last week's session on agents. And this week it's what questions are we going to ask our agents when you're going through the buying and selling process. Now, we are going live using using a technology called Restream, and we're going out to a couple of different areas. So we're going out to Facebook, to YouTube, to LinkedIn and others. So depending upon where you are, if you want to participate in the chat, in the conversation and ask questions, click on the link below and we will I would love to happily answer your questions a little bit later. I'm just going to leave that link up there for now. But today we're talking all about, as I said, real estate agents and the questions that you want to ask them, when you're trying to interview them either through the buying or selling process. You see, our ability to actually get information out of the agents is going to determine whether or not they're, the agent that we want to sell through or the agent we want to buy through. You see, most agents have a skill one way or the other. So some are great to buy through because you can talk them down and you can get super discounts out of them. And others are great to sell through because they will hold firm and get the maximum price point you want. So these questions are going to try to help you to elicit which one of those agents are actually going to serve you best. And that's also going to help you when you're trying to purchase properties to go for the opposite of the one that you would actually sell through. So part of the interview process is us trying to work that out. Now, there's some questions that you want to ask every single agent. There's some questions that you're only going to ask the agents when you're buying, and some questions you're going to ask only when you're selling. But in all instances, there's going to be first impressions and how you actually deal with your agent the very first time you meet them, okay? So firstly, are they early to the appointment, or they just arrive on time, or are they turning up late? Now, that's going to set the tone for how your engagement is and your perception of them. But more importantly, you want to start to understand whether or not that's the tone that they're going to set when they actually turn up to a home open, okay? So if they are constantly running late and racing into the home open at the last minute, and there's people queued up at the door, they're always going to be flustered. It can leave a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth of the purchaser, and that's actually tainted typically to the house, not necessarily the agent. So they get a bad experience in going into the house in the first place, and so that can sometimes reflect poorly on your property. So you want to make sure that that first impression is really, really good, and that they're always going to turn up on time and set the tone, and ideally even turn up early. The next thing is, do they actually look the part? So, you don't want them turning up looking scruffy or, still looking, casual. You notice that most real estate agents are dressed up. They look the part. They quite often turn up in a nice car. Whether they've actually got success or not, they want to be seen as if they're actually having success, because that exudes confidence in the, person on the other side of the transaction. If you can tell that, they're not confident, they will quite often not, look the part in that sort of thing. The next part is, how well do they communicate? So does that confidence, is it just a surface level physical confidence, or do they communicate with confidence as well, okay? So are they natural in their communication style? Are they able to deal with banter? Are they able to go wherever you go in the conversation and match and mirror you? Are they able to, more importantly, build rapport with the buyers? Okay, that's a really, really important process, especially if you are the buyer. Okay, and so I guess some of that confidence comes from years of actually doing the job, if they've been doing it for years, and some of it is just natural to some people, irrespective of the process. So they're the first impression elements that you want to understand when you're actually meeting with an agent. Then there's questions that you're going to ask every single agent, irrespective whether you're buying, whether you're selling, that sort of thing. And I guess you're going to start to listen with a slightly different slant depending upon the purpose that you're, engaging with the agent. But similar sort of question either way. So that would be, what is your experience? Now there's different ways of framing that, but what we want to do is we want to understand whether or not they actually understand the market that you are actually trying to sell in. So firstly, are they an expert in your property type? So are they residential or commercial? type agent? Are they only dealing with high-end luxury properties, or are they only dealing with run rate commodity stock? Are they only dealing with new homes, or perhaps only in rural areas? So when you understand the experience and where their niche is, that's going to help you to understand whether the property that you're transacting through, whether or not that fits very squarely in the niche. Are they an area expert? So do they know everything that's actually happening in and around the area? Do they know where the schools are? Do they know where the shops are? Do they know the cafe down the road with the perfect coffee? Those sorts of things. You want to actually have someone who's got a very, very strong history in that. And I'll go into that a little bit later, that area expertise part as well. But you want to understand that that agent has got plenty of experience in the area at minimum, even if they are only a new agent per se. Now, everyone has to do their first deal and has to do their first transaction. Ideally, you don't want it to be you unless you are buying. That's always an advantage. But you're going to try and understand that, through the process to see where they've actually got their experience. So what do they know about the local area? So as I say, the purchaser of the home, they see themselves living in that home typically. And so they're going to ask the agent all sorts of questions. And depending upon the demographic that suits the property type, they might be asking, where is the local school? Are we in the catchment area? Where are the buses running by? Those sorts of questions. It's those little tidbits that the agent can actually do off the top of his head that keeps the banter flowing and keeps the person engaged and makes them feel that this is the right property for them, because it ticks all the boxes that person actually wants to know. So like I said, that little coffee shop that does a fabulous breakfast and awesome coffee and all that sort of stuff, that's really, really important. The local supermarket, do they cater for specialty goods? Maybe it's an Asian mart, maybe it's got some good vegan goods, maybe it's a health food store. Understand all of those little elements, because when the buyer expresses themselves in certain ways, you want to be able to draw their attention to, hey, here are all the services that are going to match you in that area, okay? Now, there's going to be lots of different things that are going to fit into that area, but good local knowledge is critical, even if the agent doesn't have much real-world experience in actually selling. So make sure, at very minimum, that they've got that real-world experience, okay? Next question you're going to ask is, can you give me some references from recent sales? Now, notice I said references and not examples of previous sales. So now a reference is, I want to actually talk to the person that you actually dealt with on the other side of the transaction. Now, it might have been a buyer, it might have been a seller, but you want to actually ask for those references. Now, whether they provide those or not can give you a good insight into the level of experience. So either they're reluctant to give you the numbers because they, might be disappointed or concerned about the feedback they're actually going to give, or maybe they're unable to because they just haven't had the number of sales to have some references. Either way, they are potential red flags that are going to give you some insights. But if they do give it to you, understand that most people on the other side are more than happy to talk about their experience and their transaction. If they've had a really good experience, they're more than happy to talk about their agent and pass it on. And if they're unhappy, you'll generally get to hear about that as well. Okay, so make sure that you don't just say, give me your best references, but you actually want them specific to the most recent sales. Okay, now, of course, that means, well, what were your most recent sales? So you want to understand all of those recent sales, and you want to start to understand, well, what was the listing price versus the sale price? What that's going to determine is, well, how much of a discount process did we actually have to go through in order to get that sale to actually occur? And that's going to give you some insights into whether or not this is an agent that pumps up the tires of the vendor in order to get the listing, and then goes about conditioning the vendor to push the price point down. So let's give you some really good indications on that. Now, if you do your market research and go, well, was the listing price fair and appropriate in the first place? That's going to give you some indications of that. Now, if it was fair and appropriate, and you can see that discount level is really, really small, you want to start to compare that to the discount levels of other agents in the area and make sure that they actually rate when it actually comes to that. Next question you want to understand is how and how often they prefer to communicate. Now, some agents love getting on the phone and actually talking to you and giving you that real personal experience. Some agents like firing out emails. Some agents like doing SMSs. All of those might be great for the agent. The question is, what's great for you? And you may have a preferred communication style because your work doesn't allow for certain communications to occur during the day, so you can only go via text, or you may prefer that personal touch where you can actually get more of a Q&A type experience. So you want to understand, well, what is that agent's natural communication style? And then more importantly, with that communication style, are they flexible in order to accommodate your needs, right? So whilst they may have that as their preferred method, will they flex? And if they're not prepared to flex, well, maybe they're not prepared to flex with the person on the other side of the transaction either. So, if they're only pushing information out one way, that can make the person on the other side of the transaction feel a little disappointed and a little bit left out. So they can't flex for you. Chances are they won't flex for other people, okay? Great question to ask your agent is, what do you think your personal strengths are as an agent, right? Now, most agents probably haven't been asked that, but there's a range of different responses that you might get around that. So some of them might respond to their experience and how long they've been in the game and how many sales they've done and how much they know the likely area and all that sort of thing. That's, I guess, a great thing to kind of drill into. Some of them might say that, they love the thrill of the chase and a love for the competition, and, they want to get the maximum achievement out of it, or the maximum price humanly possible. Some of them have a huge attention to detail. So they're going to say, well, this is my strength. I've got a huge attention to detail. I know all my vendors' names off the top of my head. I've got them all in my database, every single one. I follow them up religiously. That detail and process and that sort of thing is super critical. Some might say that they are a very proactive approach. They're not waiting for vendors to come to them, but rather they're getting on the phones and actually calling out and going, well, hey, this is a property that 6 months ago you said you might be interested in. Are you still interested? That proactivity is quite important. How engaged are they in the local area? Are they networking out in communities and schools and that sort of thing where they can actually get the message out? And whether or not they've actually got integrity, that's a strong one. If they come back and say, look, I'm a person of integrity, I'll always, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm always going to do it, okay? So ask what is their strength. Equally, ask what their weakness is, okay? See whether or not they'll actually own what their weakness is. That's important to know, because if you know what their weakness is, then you can actually, do something to accommodate for that, or potentially do something to accommodate for that. In the management style might be slightly different way of engaging with them, the way you engage, for example, or it might be that there's a blind spot that they've got on the other side that you need to keep a very close eye on in the process. Either way, their strengths and their weaknesses, most people don't actually ask those questions, okay? Next one, who else is in your team? Okay, now when somebody starts out in their career, generally they are working either by themselves or for a more senior agent. Okay, so when you ask someone who else is in your team, you're going to find out whether or not they are the big fish with other people working underneath them, or are they the little fish reporting to somebody else. Now that might have a good indication with regards to their workload. It might give you some good indications as to the food chain that they have to communicate through, whether or not they've got a huge amount of support that sits behind them, whether or not they're just a cog in the machine, or whether or not they are at the head of the machine. So understanding all of those things are going to give you some really good insights into what level of support you've actually got sitting underneath you. Maybe they're just the traffic cop. They dictate, the marketing strategy, for example, and they get somebody else to do that behind the scenes. Are you going to, have your message lost in translation as they pass that down to someone else? all of those are really, really important for you to understand. And who are you going to be dealing with on a daily basis? Are you dealing with this person, the figurehead, or are you dealing with the people under the covers? All great questions to ask, and the level of detail that you get back are probably going to give you other questions that you can then dive a little bit deeper in again. Now we get on to questions that you might ask going through the sales process. Now, the most common question that everybody asks is, how much is this going to cost? And more importantly, what are your fees? Now, this might sound like a great question, and it is, but there's a couple of idiosyncrasies and hidden traps that sit behind here. So firstly, you want to understand, be able to compare them to what their standard list price is against everybody else to see whether or not they're ratcheted really high. Get them to justify why your fee is so high or why your fee is so low. What is the value proposition that they can actually do to justify that price point? Okay. See whether or not you can start to negotiate them on that fee. Now, here's a tip. If you're able to negotiate the agent on their fee up front and get them to discount almost straight away, and it's been a really easy process for you to negotiate, maybe that person isn't the great person at negotiations because they can't even stand up for their own value proposition, which means how are they expected to stand up for you and your value proposition for your property? Okay. Now, if they were able to stand there and deliver you a really good argument as to why their fees need to be what they are, and that sounds very convincing, and you believe them, and irrespective, they're not going to move, then that in itself could be, well, maybe they're a little bit too rigid and maybe they're not flexible enough. And so it's a balance, right? So it's not about one answer is the right answer. It's about how are they actually responding? How does that banter go back and forth? What is the valid arguments that they actually are putting up to the process? So you get a really good insight into what that is. Okay. Now it's really important to understand that whilst we don't necessarily want to be paying, too much for the agent's commission, paying less doesn't actually mean that we're actually getting a better deal, because if we're disincentivizing the agent in the sales process, then there's no reason for them to actually work super hard in order to get the price point up. So with that in mind, there's some alternative things that you might want to think about, which is, well, maybe we do a low commission rate up until a baseline price. You get to this minimum price, and that's a low interest rate. And anything above that, you might ratchet up that commission to say, well, I'm going to give you some real good motivation to work super hard. You think you can get that premium price? I'm encouraging you and I'm enabling you to go for it. And I'll pay a premium above my watermark. I think that this is where the market is. You think it's up there. Well, let's pay a low commission to where the watermark is, and we'll pay a higher commission for the balance. Now, that is a great way to actually incentivize an agent to do a cracking job on you, but make sure that you make that adjusted commission well worthwhile. Note also that there's a number of different agents out there that do fixed priced commissions. Okay, now there were a whole bunch of agencies that started this process a little while ago and who haven't quite hung around in the market because their business model didn't quite work. But the fixed price model doesn't really give much incentive for the agent to actually get that high price point for you, but instead it actually incentivizes the opposite. It actually incentivizes them to just turn the property over. So if they can condition you down to convince you to a point to get to a sale, then they're actually conditioning you rather than the purchaser of the property. So you want to be very, very careful in actually going down those particular business models. Okay, so the less motivated the agent is, the less likely they are to actually work for you or work hard for you. The next question is, well, what's actually included in those fees? Okay, so is it just the commission, or does it include things like marketing, photography, signage, the inspections, floor plans, all those sorts of things? You want to get a full breakdown of all of your marketing budget for everything that you are going to go through and what they believe the costs will be. Different kinds of marketing out there. There's all sorts of things like social media marketing. There's DL letterbox drops. There's I guess, putting ads in, I guess, the major real estate portals. There's, I guess, doing letterbox drops in the area. There's flyers. There's all sorts of things like that. So what do they recommend? Why are they recommending it? And whether or not that actually suits the demographic of the area and the product type that you're actually trying to sell, okay? So most of those things are great for the right market, but is your property going to fit that market? Get them to actually explain what those elements are, why they're suggesting particular things, etc. And then ask, are there any additional costs that they need to include in the budget that you might not have factored in, okay? One of the things that gets my personal goat is them charging you for a real estate agent's sign that goes out the front of the property, and the real estate agent's sign is 1,000% their branding and nothing about your property itself. So there's no photos of your property. There's no, I guess, insights into why somebody wants to go inside. There's nothing about how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. Those sorts of signs are really just promoting the agent. So if they're charging you for those, I guess all they're really doing is getting their brand out there. So be very mindful that those things exist. So for the small fraction of a cost for a fully customized, I guess, signboard out the front, make sure that you actually go to the effort of actually doing that, okay? So some other questions, I guess, when you're selling, what were your last 5 sales? This is very similar to what I asked for before, but you want to know very specifically what the last 5 sales are. You want to listen very, very, very carefully to the wording and the languaging of their answer, okay? So if they're new to the area or they're new to the agency, then sometimes the wording that they use will make it sound like it was their sale, but it might actually have been the agent's sale. So when they say, we sold this one, okay, we achieved, listen to that. What you really want is I sold and I achieved, okay? So if you can hear those things, listen for that, and drill in when you actually hear. Or when you say we, who's we? Was that you? Was that somebody in your office? Tell me a little bit about who that was and what you actually achieved. So you'll hear a lot about their sales volume, okay? But what you really want to do is understand that differential, I said, between the listing price and the actual sale results achieved, okay? And that's that discount level is really super important, okay? And the only way you're going to be able to tell that is actually to look at the specific results that they have actually achieved. So don't go just taking face value at it, but actually go and drill into it. Okay, so some other questions when selling. How do you maintain relationships with the buyer? We spoke before about communications to you, but what about communications to the other side? Now, you want to understand that when people have gone through a home open, you want to know what is the process after they've gone through a home open. How do they nurture that particular buyer in order to keep them engaged in the process? Quite often, they'll take some sort of register when they walk in the door. That register will then put them onto the database, and then the database is going to then do a whole bunch of things. Well, you want to know what those things are. Are they going to get a text message with a link to the listing? Excuse me. Are they going to get an email that's going to talk about the home and I guess the benefits of it? Is that also going to be promoting not just your home, but hey, other homes like it? In which case, it's really more marketing the agent rather than your home. Okay, so how does that nurture look after you and your property, as opposed to how does that nurture look after the agent and their listings as a package? Okay, understand what they are. Are they phoning people? How often do they phone them? Is it a text message? What is it that they do in order to maintain those relationships with the buyers? What about relationships with buyers that didn't come through your property? So what about the ones that have been on the agent's database for quite some time? So they might have been in the system. They might have gone through a similar property 6 months ago, for example, on the database. How does that agent go and engage those people? Is it just firing emails out to them and hoping? Or is it going through their database and selectively going through and going, hey, I remember Joe and Mary, they really wanted a property just like this. I'm going to proactively give them a call and see whether or not they are still in the market or still interested in a property, because this one sounds like a cracker, right? So how proactive are they? Are they just using those passive processes, or are they proactively going out? Is the database that they're using, is that their database personally, or is that the database of the agency as a whole? Now, you need to understand how the real estate market generally is put together. Now, not every agency works this way, but a lot of them do. And that is, there is, I guess, a head office, which is the branding for the organization. They sell that down as a franchise. And so there is an owner of the business. And then most agents underneath that then are subcontractors into the business. And so each agent tends to have their own database. And then there is also a master database for the agency. And sometimes that goes all the way up to the master franchise. Now, not every agency does it that way, but functionally, that's the hierarchy of how a lot of agencies work. So you want to understand, am I just getting your individual database, Mr. Agent or Mrs. Agent, or do I get access to all of the databases of everybody in your office, or is that everyone in this geographic region, for example? Okay, so really important to understand that, because that can potentially broaden out the number of potential interested parties in your property. Other ones. Another question to ask when selling: who do you think will be, who do you see as the person that will likely be buying my home? You want to understand, does the agent actually understand the market, and do they understand your particular property? And do they know what demographic might be potentially buying it? So do you think they know, is it an owner-occupier? Is it an investor? Is it a small family? How do they actually read the market? How do they interpret your property, and how are they best going to represent your property in order to target that market? Okay, so that's one of the most critical questions, because it's whether or not they're actually going to hit the target market. Okay, so if they're targeting families, for example, then their marketing wants to talk about the proximity to schools and parks and things like that. If they're targeting a younger demographic, then where they put their marketing, most of the younger people are going to be doing online searches. Okay, if they see it as an older person, a lot of people still read the paper, for example, so that might change the marketing campaign. So there's a lot of things like that you want to start to understand. What do you think the home? Who do you best think the home suits? And what is the demographic of the area, and how do the two of those align, and what are we actually going to do in order to market the property from a wording perspective and also a go-to-market perspective? Okay, so that might change. Do you use social media? Yes or no? Do you use newspapers? Yes or no? What is the language and the phraseology that you're actually using in those ads as well? Okay. Next question, do you recommend an auction or a private treaty? Okay, you want to understand why, and not just what sales method, but more importantly, why they think that's the case. Now, every single property is different, and so they all have pros and cons as to different ways of doing that. Now, in doing so, you want to understand the agent's reasoning that sits behind it, okay? So an agent might recommend an auction because they believe that the property is really unique and that they're going to get a whole bunch of strong and healthy competition in some instances. But sometimes that uniqueness means, well, there's only one potential interested party or one or two, and there's probably not enough healthy competition. So sometimes your property can be too unique, okay? So maybe that might be to the exclusion of a whole bunch of people. So it's really important to actually understand that. Is that methodology that they're promoting, is that really because of the property and the I guess the specifics of the property, or is that really just the sales method that particular agent is very, very good at? Okay. A lot of agents like the auction method, and the reason why they like the auction method is because it brings to a head the decision-making process and I guess turns over properties much, much quicker. The problem with the auction process is it means that your buyer must be unconditional and ready for unconditional within a very short period of time. And sometimes the buyers just don't have the ability to get themselves, market ready in time, even though they are a qualified buyer and they may potentially be able to pay a little bit more. And so understanding what the demographic of the area is, whether or not your property is actually unique, what's actually going on in the market right now, would actually determine which of those methods is actually best to go right here, right now. Okay, so in a super hot market, which it has been relatively recently, you see a lot more auctions because people start to get in a frenzy, and so that at those points in time, auction processes are fantastic. When markets start to slow down, less people actually turning up, that frenzy is not there anymore. People are worried about the market dropping. Auctions are like, going out to and seeing tumbleweeds go whizzing past, and nobody's putting their hand up and nobody's willing to put anything on it. And it actually can be quite a daunting process going there and watching the poor auctioneer trying and pleading with the audience to actually put their hand up and nobody wanting to do that. So understand not just the what, but also the when and the why of the property and the process that you're actually going to go through. Next question, what do you think my asking price should be? Okay. Again, this is about a read on the market. Is the property market going strong? Is it going weak? Do you want to leave an open, offers here and above? Do you want to have no price actually listed? Do you want to have a firm price, or do you want to have a listed price or nearest offer? Okay, lots of different motives and tactics that sit all around those, and you want to not only ask the agent what do they think the price should be, but also that price, the marketing of that price and the advertising of that price. How do they think that should actually be promoted and why? Okay, really, really important to actually understand the why. There are going to be times where, again, in that up market, you might do an offers above type category because you're expecting multiple people to come in, lots of different people putting offers in, get into a multi-vendor situation. Whether you're doing an auction or not, when you've got multiple vendors fighting over each other, then the agent has an opportunity to say, well, we know that it has to be over here. What is your best price over there? Because this will be, a last and final type opportunity. There are other times where they're going to have a ceiling that is more an optimistic price they want to try and get to, but not necessarily a realistic price. And they're going to start to, condition you down. And they're really just trying to encourage the market up. So understand, what it is, why it is. A lot of that is to do with market cycles. A lot of that to do with your unique property. A lot of that is to do with, the person or the people that are in the market right here, right now, looking at properties just like yours. Okay. Next kind of question, what can I do to improve the value of my property? Okay, so a knowledgeable real estate agent should be able to give you lots of ideas to improve the potential for the sale of your home. So do you need to do a small lick of paint? Do you want to need to do something with the front facade? Maybe fix the fence at the front and give that a lick of paint. What are the little tips and tricks and tweaks to improve that street appeal that's actually going to get people in the door in the first place? Maybe you've got one of those properties where, the front of it doesn't look very good, but once they get inside that front door, it just goes, wow. So what is it we can do to entice them over that line, over that threshold? Okay, so a good agent's going to give you some really good insights into how to do that. And that is going to be very specific and very unique to your property in your condition right here, right now. Next one would be, what else can I do to the property in order to prepare? So you might do the things to make it visually appealing, and that's going to help with your photos and your marketing and all that sort of stuff. But what about on the day? Right, on the day, what can we do? They might tell you things like, well, make sure you stage it, or, well, if you're living there, these are the things you can actually do to declutter it. Put some cookies in the oven, make everything smell nice, leave some nice candles, play some play some soft music, those sorts of things. What are the things that the agent can tell you to say, well, what's going to improve the ambience of the property on the day? Okay. Maybe your property is in a very leafy environment and a lot of leaves always fall down and fall in the pool. They might say, well, the morning of, you need to scoop all the leaves out of the pool. Little things like that. You want your agent to be able to be very clear, very specific on it. There might be some idiosyncrasies about your property with regards to a proximity to a train line or proximity to an air flight path, those sorts of things. And they might choose to do it at a certain time of the day in order to avoid those elements and make sure that they are representing the property in its best light. Okay. Equally, your property might not get much sunlight, and so trying to sell that later in the afternoon when there's lots of sunlight there, or it might be the exact opposite. Maybe you get too much sunlight and it's a belting hot property, so they might want to list it early in the morning. So those sorts of things are really important that you actually have that conversation and banter with your agent to actually understand how and when to sell it and what that actually is going to do. You want to understand how that agent's going to keep you up to date in the process, as I touched on before, what's their preferred communication style, all that sort of thing. But all of those questions are ones that you are going to be asking the agent, but anticipate that in all of that, the agent's actually going to start to want to ask you questions as well. Okay, so more important. So one of them's the most likely, why are you selling? Okay, so this is going to give the agent a little bit of an insight into I guess your timelines, I guess the purpose of the sale, that sort of thing. It's a very common question that they get asked. And so being able to have some sort of integrity with their ability to respond on your behalf so it doesn't sound like a desperate sale, that sort of thing. Be prepared that that agent's going to ask you those questions. And so if you're in a situation where maybe you are actually desperate in selling, you may not want to represent that well. So think about the answer so that you're not caught on the spot and just regurgitate something that is then something that they can actually use against you a little bit later on. Okay. Another question that they're going to potentially ask you is, when do you actually need to move out by? Now, this is going to give them some insights into the urgency of the sale with regards to, well, have you got something to move onto in the next property? Have you already bought? Are you moving straight away? Is the house going to be empty? Or do you need this sale before you can actually move on to the next sale? All of those things are really important for them to actually understand. When do you need the funds for those sales? If you've already gone and bought somewhere else, you potentially might be in what is called a bridging loan, in which case you want to roll those funds over as quick as humanly possible. It might be that you're cashed up and you've already gone and paid for the next property, and you're not really worried too much about the timeline it takes. And so you might be a lot more flexible with your settlement timelines. All of that is really important for the agent to actually understand, so that when a vendor comes and makes an offer or shows an interest in making an offer, that they're able to represent the property in the best light. Okay. Who is going to be helping you to make the decision? Now, if you're in a couple, is it truly a joint decision, or has one person usually got, I guess the decision-making power in that? So whether it's the husband, whether it's the wife, doesn't matter. Sometimes one has a stronger feeling or a stronger driver or stronger influence in that relationship. And so when you understand who that is, when you understand who the people are involved, sometimes it's going to be something like a deceased estate, and there might be 5 family members. So you need to understand all of the dynamics of everybody that's going to be involved. So understand those questions are actually going to come your way, okay? One of the other questions, do you have somewhere to move into? So are we able to actually sell the house in an empty condition? So people, are they going to be seeing it completely stark empty with no furniture? Is it going to have your furniture and your belongings and your clutter in there? They want to understand all of that so they can actually understand whether or not how they're going to photo it, how are they going to stage it, how they're going to present it, how they're going to market it. Okay. Where are you moving to? Is it going to be local? Is it going to be interstate? Those sorts of questions, again, give some insights because the agent is almost invariably looking for well, how do I help you to buy the next property down the road somewhere? So if you can give them some insights in that, they might actually help you to actually move if you can play your cards right. Okay. They're almost invariably going to ask you the exact question that you asked them, which is, what do you think it's worth? What they're doing is they're testing you to see, I guess, one, have you actually got a market awareness? And two, is that market awareness realistic? Or are you being overly optimistic, underly prepared, that sort of thing? And that's going to give them some insights into when they come to you with an offer, what is the reality that you're actually going to be doing a deal? They're going to genuinely care whether or not that's something that, are they putting a lot of effort in only to find that you're going to crash it at the last minute? So know what those numbers are that you think that you want to sell the property for. You might have a price in your head that you're willing to settle for. Maybe that's not the price that you tell them. You might tell them 20, 30, 50K above that particular price point because you've got an optimistic price and a realistic price. But know the question's coming, okay? Next question is there anything else I should know about the property, okay? What they're wanting to know is what's the little idiosyncrasies and challenges and bumps when somebody is going to go walking through the property and ask me a curly question. What's the answer to that curly question? I don't even know what the question's going to be yet, but can you give me some insights into some challenges that you know that's sitting here? So, for example, you might know that in the past there has been some termite infestation and you've repaired the termites and they've been treated and they're dead. You might know all of that. And then the buyer's going to go do a building and pest inspection and they're going to find that out. It's much better to have disclosed that up front so the agent actually knows that. And the agent can then give them the insight on that before it's discovered. That way, it's not a surprise. It's not going to be a showstopper. They can broker that information at the right moment, the right time. Okay. Is there anything else about the property that you want to reveal? So what do you think the next person's going to love most about your property? So there might be some little quirk, some little feature, some little idiosyncrasy about your property that you and only you know about. But if you let the agent know, maybe you've got, in-house sound system through the whole property and nobody knows how to do it. Maybe you've got smart lighting and the agent doesn't know how to turn it on. What are the little, little value adds that the agent can throw in there and use as a little hook during the sales campaign? Know that those things are actually going to be there, okay? Next one is they're going to want to know whether or not you're actually 100% committed to the sale. Sometimes people go and feel the market out. They're not 100% committed, so they genuinely want to know, are you actually moving on? Are you have you got somewhere else to go? Is this something that's actually burning, or are you just kind of feeling the market because you see the market pushing? And if you get a crazy price, you'll sell. If you don't get a crazy price, you won't. So they're going to want to know if that's genuinely the case. Okay. They'll also want to know if you've previously had it on the market with another agent and it hasn't sold. They're going to want to know how long it's been on the market for, who the other agent was, why you think it didn't sell. Do you think it was the agent? Do you think it was the campaign they did? Do you think the price point was wrong? They're going to want to know what you genuinely thought the reason for that lack of sale was to occur, so they can do something to remedy that where humanly possible. They're also going to want to know what your biggest concerns are at all about selling in the market right now. So if you're concerned that the market's dropping off, are you prepared to just take any offer that's coming your way? So long as it's within realistic value. Or if you think that the market is skyrocketing, are you concerned that it's going to sell too cheap and 2 weeks later that you could have got extra money? They want to know what all of that's going to be about. So make sure you're prepared for all of that. And then lastly, guys, there's questions when you are buying that you're going to want to ask the agent, which is precisely all the ones that the agent just asked you, but in reverse. Okay, so when you're talking to the agent because you're buying, what you want to know is really the question from the vendor, right? So what's the reason that the vendor is selling? What is their big why? Have they got somewhere to go? Are they wanting to stay in the local area? All the same questions that you just got asked by your agent in trying to sell is what you're going to be asking of the vendor. Where are they moving to? Okay. When did they need to be there and why? Okay. When do they actually need the cash? When do the funds need to be available? Who's helping make the decision? Who's the decision maker in the process? Can you sit down with them? Can you actually have a conversation with the vendor and actually get to understand their needs as well as their wants, and their motives and drivers for sale? You want to know whether or not they are genuinely committed to the sale as well. Okay, so how can you tell whether or not they're actually genuinely committed? You want to know if it's been on the market, how long it's been on the market, and again, why it hasn't sold. All the same things that you were just being asked a couple of moments ago. Next one really is the do's and don'ts. You've had a whole bunch of conversations, a whole bunch of questions to your agents. Now, what do you do? Okay, so trust your gut. So do trust your gut. If you get a challenging response from your agent, a difficult question, I guess a conversation or an answer that you're not quite comfortable with, dive into it, lean in, actually drill out and get the information. Don't just take them at face value and hope that they're doing the right thing. Trust your gut and drill and get the answer. Okay, you only get one chance to buy. You only get one chance to sell for that one particular property. So you want to make sure that you've got the right person on the job doing that. Okay. Do speak to more agents, more than one. Okay. Make sure that you're comparing all of your agents. Make sure that you're getting the right person for the job. Okay. You want to make sure they've got the right level of experience, the right level of market experience, the right level of local experience, that they've got the right candor, the right demeanor, that they've got the right, flexibility in the process, and that they really understand your product and your product well. Okay. Do give yourself enough time. Okay. Don't try and do this in a rush. Especially if you're trying to sell a home, make sure that you are prepared. You go to the market with the right amount of time so that you aren't coming across as a desperate seller. And if you are a purchaser, make sure you've given yourself a lot of time to make sure that you're actually getting the right deal, not just the next deal. Okay. And make sure, more importantly, ask for help. Ask for help in the community. Ask for help in your mentors, that sort of thing. Have they got any experience in dealing with that particular agent? Do they know what their results are? Are they good, bad, or indifferent experiences that everybody's had in that process? There you have it, folks. That's the questions to ask your agent. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to see if I can jump out to Facebook land, see what questions may have come through, and see if I can actually help you out. Lots of people saying hello. So hello, everybody. Karen says, sell off the plan or once build's completed. That's a question. Should I sell off the plan or once build's completed? Great question, Karen. So let me reframe that for everyone else's benefit. So if you are doing a development, you have the opportunity to sell it off the plan to someone before it's physically constructed, or you can actually go and get it all the way through to completion stage. And the difference is, do you want to take certainty and guaranteed price point and then protect yourself from any market fluctuations? Or alternatively, do you want to ride the market, sell the finished product when people can go through it, when they can touch it and feel it and smell it and see whether or not their furniture fits and all that sort of stuff? Okay. So the question that Karen's asking is, what's really the agent's take on the market and where the market's going right now? So if the market is going up, the agent is probably going to say, ride it. Okay. Get it through to completion. It'll be a much easier sale, and we'll be able to take them through a finished product with nice staging and get them emotionally invested and that sort of thing. If the agent thinks that the market is going the other way, then the agent might suggest, hey, just take the money and run. Okay, take the money on the table right now. It might be a little bit less, but we know that you're going to have certainty. And if the market does shift against you, So that's the kind of feedback that you're really wanting. Is it's not whether or not they think these should sell off the plan right now, but really what is the market doing right now? What's the agent's view on that market? Vijan says, "Hi Rob, what is a typical percentage agents charge for selling? Thanks." Vijan, that changes all the way around the country, mate. They're very, very different in different markets, and the reason for that is because the typical sale price changes very significantly. There are some areas where typical sale price is in the 500K range, and there are others where it's breaching the $1 million range. And so the same percentage gives a much bigger commission back to the agent. And so what you'll find is it ranges from about 1.5% through to about 3%, depending upon where you are in the country, the kind of product that you're in, the kind of the market that you're in, etc. So hoping that helps. But the best bet, mate, is to make sure that you ask several agents in your area to find out what's the norm in your particular neighborhood, because you might find that your neighborhood has a premium or is something that agents, I guess, are more of a churn. So understand that in your market, mate. Arun says, use sites like Rate My Agent, Open Agent, etc., to check who is active, number of sales, average percentage, prices, etc. Absolutely, Arun. I actually touched on that last week. But yes, you are correct. There's a few other of those agency type sites as well. So if you want the complete list, go back to last week's Sunday session. Andy says, "Hey Rob, can you remind me how to identify the differential between listing and sale price?" Andy, you won't typically get that as a display in your sales portal, but if you do a data extract out of your portal, you will generally get to see the advertised price. Now, that said, and I'm going to correct myself here, that said, if you actually look at the sales history, you will actually see every ad that they've actually placed and whether or not that ad actually had a price point associated with it. So if it's an unlisted price, you won't see the price. So do the data extract and you'll actually see what the under the cover price actually was. So combination of both, mate. Arun says, Andy, use RP data or price finder or national property data, Arun. Vijan says, thank you. Karen says, thanks, Rob. Okay, that's all the questions from there. Just seeing whether or not there are any other questions coming from any of my other forums, and I can't see any of them coming through. So that said, folks, I'm going to say thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, and I will come to you again for a Sunday session, same time next week. Until then, bye for now. Bye.